Hello, welcome to episode 27 of the Intern's Oddities. Today we'll be continuing our series on the American Revolution, and today we will be discussing the Battle of Bunker Hill. So, thank you all for coming to hang out. Howdy, James. Good to see you. Yep, I'm actually live today. I had the day off, so I thought I would actually do it live today. That's why I was a few minutes late. So, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to talk about as far as Bunker Hill is on April 14th, 1775, British General Thomas Gage received orders to put an end to the rebellion and disband the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, as well as to arrest resistance leaders such as Samuel Adams, named after the beer, of course, and John Hancock. You know, the I think he was the father of dirty jokes or something. I did not get a haircut. I got a beard cut. I trimmed my beard. Thank you for noticing. Thank you very much for noticing. I felt like a woman. I kept waiting for someone to notice, and no one said anything. So he was worried that this would cause riots and outright rebellion, so he was hesitant, though he still refused to simply disobey orders. So, on the night of April 18th, General Gage gathered his men for a briefing on their mission. This army of his included over 700 infantry, which would cross the Mystic River by boat before marching the remaining 17 miles to Concord, where they would then destroy all military supplies before returning back to base. So there's already a lot going on. You know, they're getting ready to destroy military supplies. They got 700 people in their army. You know, there's a lot going on. So, anyways, though he had sent men out to scout the area ahead of time, the Sons of Liberty, the Lale Lile Lo, discovered their intentions quickly, which was when Dr. Joseph Warren dispatched Paul Revere and William Dawes to sound the alarm. And yes, I do believe this is the classic story of Paul Revere when, you know, he rides down and he's like, the British are coming, the British are coming, all that we heard in school back when we were kids. Well, I don't know about everyone else, but they taught me that back in school. Just a little bit, you know. But I'm sure most of you already know that story, so I didn't want to get too far into that, you know. I didn't want to like go too far into all that because I'm sure everyone already knows all that. So they sent Paul Revere and William Dawes to sound the alarm. These two men ended up in Lexington to warn the local militia as well as Adams and Hancock, who were hiding within the village. Afterwards, Paul Revere and William Dawes were joined by Dr. Samuel Prescott, where they rode on to Concord. But on the way, the men ran into a British roadblock, and Paul Revere was captured, though the other two men were able to escape. Well, sort of. Prescott fell from his horse, but Dawes was able to make it all the way to Concord in order to send them a message around 3 a.m., at which time the companies all over Massachusetts, the militia companies, were heading towards Concord. All usable stores were removed within a few hours of the arrival of Prescott, thus rendering the invasion mission by the British unsuccessful. The soldiers start. Now, this is where we're getting that pretty good so far. So it sounds like they're doing pretty good, you know, at stopping the British. They're able to warn them, get their stores out. All right, so we're off to a good start, it sounds like. The soldiers had a stare off with the militia until a shot rang out, which nobody knows who fired, but this later came to be known as the shot heard around the world. It's the one you were talking about last time, James. That battle actually takes place in the middle of the Bunker Hill battle. So I tried not to go too far into it and just keep to the stuff that, you know, was most important to understand and relevant to this particular battle. But that's the one that we were talking about last time that you told me about with the Battle of Bunker Hill and all that. The shot heard around the world. I didn't realize that was actually part of the Battle of Bunker Hill. So, as the chaos ensued, the militia retreated back towards a bridge, and another standoff ensued from this point, as another shot was fired from the British side, which caused retaliatory gunfire, of course, without orders, just like before. But, I mean, come on. I know you're not supposed to attack unless you're given a command, but if someone is shooting at you, you're probably most likely going to shoot back before you're given the command. It's not like, hey, you don't have to give me a command to defend my life. If someone's trying to attack me, I'm going to defend my life before you give me a command. You know? Like there's just a lot of crazy stuff goes on in the army, I'm sure. And everyone's like, "Oh no, it's a conspiracy theory. That's crazy." Well, conspiracy theories have to start somewhere. And without crazy, we wouldn't know what sane was. And without sane, we wouldn't know what crazy was. One cannot exist without the other. So anyways, I'm getting off track. So, as the British continued to retreat, they were allowed to recover their wounded and they were ordered to return to Boston, though the countryside was swarming with nearly 2,000 outraged militia who would ambush the retreating British, causing 300 casualties before they were finally able to escape. And I think this is around the part where we left off last time when they were able to escape. And then we're going to continue on from here. So all this stuff from here, it should be fairly new stuff. So, Gage refused to impose martial law or take action against any opposition newspapers, instead deciding to craft a deal with city aldermen to surrender any remaining weapons in exchange for safe passage out of Boston. On the other side of things, Gage also began to immediately build fortifications on the Boston Neck, as well as sending reinforcements to Charlestown to fortify the heights, which would later go on to be abandoned, as he has to tighten his lines later on when he gets into some trouble. So he gets into some stuff later on. James, it was due to the inaccurate weapons, the formation, and the tactics of the time. Oh, I like that you actually mentioned the formation and the tactics of the time in particular, because when I was doing my research, I saw some videos on it, and dude, it straight up looked like some Age of Empires and Civilization type stuff, and I was, I was like, I was impressed by how like just many problems they had without going on a whole rant as I realized I was about to start, but they had lots of problems and it was just problem after problem. Like it's crazy how much was going on during all this. So after all this, the next thing he would do is request surplus troops from Canada to assist him in Boston as well as London. Though little did he realize, London was already on the way. They were already on the case. A British army of 4,500 led by Major Generals William Howe, John Burgoyne, and George Clinton had already been dispatched to Boston, along with a Royal Navy squadron in March. By the morning of April 20th, about 16,000 members of the Massachusetts militia, now commanded by Major General Artemus Ward, were assembled in the hills surrounding Boston, and as news of the bloodshed at Lexington and Concord began to spread, more and more soldiers began marching towards Boston from New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, all of whom would eventually come to fall under the command of Ward. Not a great time to be a soldier or an American. Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of bad things happening for the Americans at the time. Like, even outside of the war, it sounds like it was just a bad political time in general, which is kind of why one of the reasons I wanted to go through this as one of our topics, because it feels like let's call it a conflicting time in American politics and the country right now. It feels like the country is divided, and it's a little scary to think about what could happen. But some people say I'm overreacting and getting through stuff. So, anyways, then some propaganda stuff went on, as it always does, before Gage was able to write his report, and as a result, it did not seem to favor the British government and instead favored the colonial patriots. This was most effective in the colonies, where many moderate loyalists changed sides, and in turn, legislatures began stripping royal governors of their powers, if not outright expelling them. So they started kicking their own people out of the country, the governors even. Like you think just because you're in politics you're safe, but even the governors were not doing too well during this time. So this all grew to be far too complicated for any one colony to come up with a solution for, so they reconvened the Continental Congress earlier than planned. A young Benedict Arnold, yes, that Benedict Arnold. Uh, he was sneaky though. Like I got to give him that. He was very very sneaky about the way he did this. So what he did is he would write to the Connecticut Committee of Correspondence that on his last trip to Fort Ticonderoga just the year before, it was undermanned with plentiful stores of gunpowder and cannons, and the committee immediately dispatched a force to take the fort, raising militia on the road. Now here's the crazy thing. This was only the beginning. This thing spiraled out of control so bad. Like it just listen to what happened from here. Like it gets so crazy. Arnold, uh, Arnold, Benedict Arnold, not Arnold Schwarzenegger. He will not be back. Benedict Arnold will not be back. I apologize. But Arnold, being unaware of these developments, arrived outside of Boston and told their Committee of Safety the same thing. On May 3rd, Massachusetts commissioned him a colonel, assigned him a recruiter and funds before telling him to go take the fort as well. So now you got the first, what was it, the Safety Committee and the Connecticut Committee of Correspondence. Now you got two armies going after this one place that's already understaffed, Fort Ticonderoga. Now you got two armies going after this one place. Now stuff's getting a little bit out of hand. So Arnold soon learned that guess what? Guess what? Even more militia in Castleton, led by Ethan Allen, were already preparing to take Ticonderoga. So now we're up to three armies trying to take this place that's understaffed. But Arnold was determined to get the credit, so he ran ahead to meet with Allen and claim leadership of the expedition. Now, a lot of stuff happened and it got complicated, but long story short, things didn't go exactly as planned. But the only sentry on duty ran away and the fort was taken. Over the next few weeks, up to 400 militiamen would arrive to garrison the fort. So they basically just walked up. There was one dude there. There was just one person on duty that night, and they were against three armies. One person versus three armies. So yeah, no wonder they ran away, and they just claimed the fort just like that. Now, the same day, the Second Continental Congress convened with its powers and objectives unclear as they were simply told to meet and discuss what to do about the British while not being given any specific stipulations of how far their power went. They eventually agreed that war was upon them and it was time to create an army. Fortunately, there was an army already in existence around Boston, and on the 14th of June, Congress decreed the formation of the Army of the United Colonies, which would consist of the militia units in the Boston area. The next day, recommended by John Adams, they picked their new general and commander in chief, George Washington, from Virginia, with Dr. Joseph Warren as his second in command. Ward and Gage were still stuck in a stalemate, as Gage was trapped in Boston, running low on supplies, and Ward was unsure if the troops would follow his commands or not, on top of his own supply issues. On May 25th, Burgoyne and Clinton would arrive in Boston, thus effectively bringing the troop numbers up to 6,000. So he finally got some reinforcements over in Boston. So let's see what happens now. It was at this time that Gage began making plans to break out of Boston, and these plans were finalized on June 12th when they decided that they would seize the Dorchester Neck and then fortify the Heights to use as a staging ground to sweep the militia from Roxbury before two more attacks would reclaim Charleston and Cambridge. However, these plans were leaked to the opposition and ruined these plans, as upon receiving this information, Ward realized the danger and sent Putnam, his second in command, to go fortify the heights above Charleston. On the night of June 16th, Colonel William Prescott led 1,200 militia across the Charleston Neck to begin expanding and improving the abandoned fortifications on Bunker Hill before soon realizing that Breed's Hill was the better artillery position and began constructing the primary redoubt there. So he came in and he's like, I know you told me to go on this hill, but I think this one's better. So I'm just gonna go over here. I'm gonna build some stuff over here instead. All right. So once the sun finally rose and Gage realized the situation he was in, he ordered a bombardment of Breed's Hill. However, it was completely ineffective as it was too high up for the hill for the warships to reach and too far for the Boston batteries to reliably hit. So a ground assault would be necessary for this mission. Prescott realized how easy it would be to flank Breed's Hill, and thus he ordered breastworks be built upon the more vulnerable east side, hoping the steepness of the west side was enough protection, as he was short on troops. Prescott was able to acquire reinforcements while the other side prepared to attack and made their plans to flank them from all sides. Once the battle began, General Putnam continued trying to send reinforcements to Breed's Hill, but his orders were continually ignored or misunderstood as they were having trouble commanding all these troops. Many Continental militiamen were deserting the battle, and there were now only about 800 troops on the peninsula, with 150 in the redoubt, so Clinton personally led reinforcements across the Charles River to help Howe. So it's not going too well for them. They started off with like 16,000 troops, and now they're down to 800. Or was it 1,600 or 16,000? Let me go look. Okay, it was 6,000. Sorry, my numbers were off. But yeah, they had all those troops, and now they're down to 800. So, as the others began retreating for Breed's Hill, Colonel Prescott was one of the last to flee, urging the men to keep fighting while knocking away bayonet thrusts with his ceremonial sword. So he's out there just these people got guns on him and all that. They're trying to shoot him and he's just like, "Away. Flee. Get away from me." Just swinging at them with his sword. He must have looked pretty cool. Stupid, but cool. I guess brave might be a good word for it. Some people might call him brave. So, one of the last men killed was Dr. Warren via a single headshot, and by 5 p.m., the militia had retreated back to Cambridge. The British were stunned by the battle, and further offensive operations were called off. On his triumph, George Clinton wrote, "A dearly bought victory. Another such would have ruined us. The British may have won the battle, but without any ability to change the strategic situation, and realized they may have underestimated the Americans and that this war was going to be much more difficult than they ever could have imagined. George Washington needed heavy artillery and tasked Henry Knox with retrieving the cannons captured at Ticonderoga." So that's what they're talking about if you've ever listened to the Hamilton soundtrack. I think they talk about that in the Hamilton songs. Sir Guy Carleton, the governor of Quebec, was rebuilding abandoned border forts and was entreating with the Iroquois Confederacy to raid Upper New York, which required a response, and on June 27th, an invasion of Quebec was authorized by Congress. In early July, Georgia finally joined the Continental Congress and sent a delegation, and on July 5th, Congress adopted the Olive Branch Petition to King George III as one final attempt to avoid war. On July 6th, Congress issued the Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms, which the two together argued was the dispute of loyal subjects of the Crown protecting themselves against a hostile Parliament. However, this was highly unsuccessful. Gage's official report on Bunker Hill finally reached London on July 20th, causing an uproar in which Lord North had Gage's recall issued on the 23rd, and as both he and the king's positions hardened, King George resolved to crush this rebellion as the Olive Branch petition was received on the 21st of August, though it was ignored, and on the 23rd, King George issued the proclamation of rebellion, which was stating that this war would be fought to the bitter end. They were not going to give up. And next time, we will be talking about the invasion of Quebec and some of the stuff that happens with that. So, thank you for coming to hang out. Thank you, James, for in the chat. Always hanging out. Always good for a chat. And next time we will talk about Quebec. And thank you for coming to hang out. I will see you next time.